Monday mornings at Halvex had always carried a quiet weight, like walking into a cathedral built from recycled carpet and passive aggression. I arrived at 8:03 a.m., 3 minutes late by my own standards, but still 20 minutes earlier than most of the digitally native hires who called coffee a personality. The lights had that blue-white buzz again. It always meant one thing: someone in facilities had tried to save on electricity and triggered the motion sensor cascade. I dropped my bag beside my desk and logged in. It took longer than usual to load new security overlay, probably another layer of streamlining from Blair's latest consulting binge. My inbox blinked alive with 3 new messages. The first was from HR with the chirpy subject line, "Let's talk retirement pathways." I blinked. Retirement? I hadn't even used half my PTO this year. I opened the email. Some vague nonsense about legacy planning, consultation, scheduling, and celebrating your next chapter. No mention of my consent, no forms I'd signed, no discussion. I scrolled down, jaw-tightening. There was already a time slot reserved for me on Friday. Exit interview, 11:00 a.m. I hadn't submitted a resignation. No performance review, no warning, just scheduled obsolescence. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling tiles until my vision blurred. A ping, new email, no subject, internal chain. My eyes scanned the sender, Blair Ridley, my manager, or whatever title she gave herself this quarter. I clicked. Just clear her out. Quietly. She'll sign anything if we smile enough. Get Desmond to run the script. Add cake if you must. I sat motionless. It was a reply. From Blair to Desmond Carr, HR lead. But the CC field included me. Likely autopilot too many HAR names in Outlook. I reread it 3 times. Quietly. Smile enough. Cake if you must. There it was. No severance meeting, no justification, no accountability, just decorum and frosting. The modern execution. I stared at the blinking cursor in the reply field for a long time. Then I clicked out of it, moved the email to a local folder, and looked around the open office floor. No one made eye contact. "I'm not signing anything," I whispered, "but I'll make them sign something." At 8:31, a calendar invite popped up. Subject: Legacy Luncheon, Thursday, 1:00 p.m. By Thursday afternoon, I'd practiced my smile 3 times in the mirror above the women's restroom sink. The smile that said, "I've accepted my fate," the corporate version of bending the knee, only with less blood and more plastic cutlery. I walked into conference room 4B and was hit by the smell of artificial frosting and cold spinach. 3 half-deflated balloons were tied to a folding table, draped in something pretending to be a linen, printed in Comic Sans on laminated cardstock. Legacy Appreciation honoring Harriet 22ers. A second banner behind the cake table read, "Farewell Harriet." The I was dotted with a tiny gold star sticker. I counted that as their effort. The cake itself was a sheet from some warehouse grocery store, probably Costco, topped with a photo of me from a 2007 compliance retreat, blown up and printed in edible ink, giving me the charming hue of someone who needed liver testing. My name was misspelled again in frosting just for consistency. A junior analyst named Dylan, hired 3 months ago to modernize our audit mapping process, stood up to give a toast. He'd known me for exactly 11 weeks and launched into a tribute that sounded like it had been AI generated by someone who'd skimmed my LinkedIn. Harriet's been a part of Halvex's compliance DNA longer than many of us have been alive. Blair appeared halfway through his monologue just in time to raise a paper cup of La Croix and say to Martha, "Sorry, Harriet, our queen of documentation. The old systems may be harder to update, but they sure don't forget anything." Laughter. Polite, awkward, engineered. I raised my cup of warm ginger ale, smiled like I hadn't heard her, and clinked glasses with the intern beside me, who was too busy texting to look up. Back at my desk, I logged in without a word and started printing. Audit logs, timestamp reports, access histories, slowly, carefully. I labeled each folder with plain names, project notes, Q3 slides, vendor reviews. Old systems don't forget. By 3:15, I was walking to the third-floor print room, watching the hallway lights flicker above me like Morse code. I wasn't backing up files because I feared forgetting. I was doing it because I knew they wanted me to forget. The kind of corporate forgetting where clean PDFs overwrite chaos and no one remembers how the numbers got rounded up. By Friday morning, I'd compiled everything I could from my assigned folders until I stumbled across something buried under compliance, legacy, Q3 audit archive vendor log. Q3 restored, I didn't remember restoring anything. The timestamp said it had been modified last week, and the user, sysadmin nobody, had used that generic admin profile since we migrated to multi-factor credentials in 2019. But the metadata pattern told me everything. It was Blair's calling card. She always masked her changes behind ghost accounts. She once told a vendor, clean hands type fastest. I opened the file. What I found looked polished. Sleeker layout, updated fonts. Even the margins had been tightened. But the invoice totals didn't match my archived version. Subtotals had shifted, approval initials were missing. Vendor now appeared 5 times in 5 separate audits each with a different tax ID. 5 aliases, same name, same shell. I checked the version history. Sure enough, the original had been deleted 3 days ago, but someone had forgotten the local backup chain. I cross-referenced it with the retention log still pinging silently under my name. They hadn't scrubbed me out of the system yet. I was still inside. I copied both versions, the fake and the original, and dropped them into an encrypted folder on my desktop. I labeled it Vacation Photos. 2017, I attached a note inside that read simply, nice formatting. But the ghost still lives in the mirror. I compressed the folder, wrapped it in AES 256, dragged a second copy into a USB partition I'd already prepped earlier that week. No passwords yet, not until it was all assembled. I sat back in my chair watching the copy bar finish its crawl. Somewhere nearby, a copier hummed and a light flickered overhead. That was when I saw Curtis for the second time that day, mopping in the blind spot of the west hallway camera. I'd always thought Curtis was a relic like the asbestos in the old HVAC or the fax machine no one dared unplug. He never said much. Just moved like someone who'd learned long ago that stillness draws suspicion. But this week, he started appearing with timing too precise to be chance. Every morning, he'd be polishing the floor near the compliance hallway just as I arrived. By mid-afternoon, I'd spot him stationed near the supply closets that had line of sight to executive conference rooms. No mop bucket, just a clipboard, and that neutral, unreadable face. It wasn't until Friday night, when the office had emptied into the long weekend shuffle, that he passed behind my chair without pausing and said so quietly I almost missed it. If you gotta print anything important, don't do it from your desk. Then he was gone, like fog dispersing between cubes. I didn't ask how he knew. I didn't need to. At 7:26 p.m., I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The copier in the northwest corner was ancient, but still connected to the secure print line. No monitoring scripts there, no keyloggers. I slipped in my backup access card and printed 36 pages of version logs, revision histories, and transfer approvals. Just enough to confirm the fraud, not enough to reveal the full depth. The hallway lights above me buzzed and flickered twice. No one else was on the floor, but I felt the air shift like an old building exhaling. I tucked the pages into a manila folder, wrote training slides in marker across the front, and returned to my cubicle without a single camera tracking the detour. The next morning, I opened my top drawer and found a sticky note I hadn't left. Narrow handwriting, faint pencil. Not all systems are digital. Watch your exits. I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened the encrypted folder on my drive and began writing file names that didn't mean what they said. Intern, Gala, JPG, Team, Go Brunch, Notes, .docx onboarding, calendar, .xls. Every skeleton needs a label. I hadn't opened the lunchbox in over a year. It had lived quietly under my desk, tucked beside a spare pair of flats and a bottle of ibuprofen. The latch still stuck on the right side, the same way it did when my father first handed it to me at his retirement party from the GM plant in Lansing. "Steel's only strong if you fill it with purpose," he'd said, sliding it across the table like a medal. I never used it for food. That afternoon, I opened it with both hands, the lid creaking like a secret being remembered. Inside were a few paper napkins, a rolled-up company pen, and a faded packet of Splenda. I removed them, gently cleared the bottom, and placed the USB drive into the center, like it was an offering. No stickers, no branding, just a strip of masking tape across the top and one word written in black, Sharpie Insurance. The contents were already layered. Metadata trails, screen captures, timestamp anomalies, login mismatches, even redacted screenshots of Slack conversations Blair thought she deleted, all filed under innocuous names. No file was what it appeared to be. I'd taken care to hide each one in plain sight. Then I wrote the trigger script. If the drive was inserted into any machine without my credentials, or if someone tried to copy or decrypt the folders, the real function would engage. The contents would splinter, encrypted, and sent via separate secure channels to a list of destinations I'd prepared over 3 nights with little sleep. SEC audit desks, 3 journalists I trusted, 1 pro bono legal group, and of course Ela Mearson, my attorney. The backup of the backup would route from my home server, silent and delayed, a whisper waiting to detonate. I closed the lunchbox slowly and pressed the latch until it clicked. The metal hummed against my palms. It was heavy, not because of weight, but because of what it now carried consequence. I slid it under my desk and stood. By Monday, I'd be scheduled for my transition conversation. The room was already booked. The calendar didn't know what else I'd be bringing with me. The conference room was already chilled when I stepped inside. That overcorrected AC hum always reminded me of hospital rooms or morgues, places where things ended in silence. Blair was seated at the head of the table, her tablet angled just so. Desmond Carr, HR's polished golden retriever in loafers, stood as I entered, then gestured to the chair across from him like I hadn't been sitting in this building longer than he'd been out of grad school. "Harriet," he said with that scripted sincerity, "thank you so much for joining us today. We just want to have a smooth, celebratory off-boarding experience." Blair smiled without showing teeth. Closure is part of growth. They began the usual lines, words like transition and next chapter accompanied by vague phrases like legacy contribution and evolving roles. It was the same nonsense they recycled in press releases whenever a VP quietly disappeared. I waited until Desmond reached for the severance envelope. Then I unlatched the lunchbox. The metal popped open with a small, satisfying click. Blair's eyes flinched before her smile returned. I removed the USB drive and placed it on the table label side up. Before I sign anything, I said, my voice calm and unhurried, "I want to make something clear. This," I tapped the drive, "is my signature. If you force mine, I release this. Automatically, to parties neither of you want copied." Desmond blinked. "Excuse me." Blair's smile wavered just slightly. "Harriet, let's not make this difficult." I tilted my head. "You already did." 6 minutes later, legal was in the room, not on the phone, in person. A woman in navy with no introduction and a clipboard that never opened. Desmond glanced at Blair. "Maybe we should pause." Blair stood, but not quickly enough. 2 security officers entered from the side door. One motioned toward the hallway without touching her. She stiffened. I watched her heels click against the tile as they walked her toward the elevators. The room fell quiet. I reached forward, slid the USB back into the box, and closed the latch. When I stood, Desmond didn't stop me. He just whispered, "We'll be in touch." But I was already out the door, walking straight into the quiet that comes before a system reboots. I didn't celebrate, I didn't speak. I just walked out of the building with the lunchbox tucked under my arm like it was any other office relic. A thank you gift from retirement maybe, or just someone's leftover soup container. The front desk didn't ask. No one made eye contact. By the time I reached home, the sky had dimmed to that flat blue-gray of early winter. I took off my coat, poured myself a glass of water, and let the silence settle. The lunchbox went on the shelf above the coat hooks next to a jar of loose keys and a decades-old box of check stubs. At 6:57 p.m., my server made a sound it hadn't made in months, a low buzz, then a ping. Alert, unauthorized access attempt. Folder photos 2017. No one had touched that folder in years. No one was supposed to. The trigger engaged before I could even reach the desk. My script ran clean. I watched it execute line-by-line packets, splitting like cells, tunneling through encrypted channels, each one destined for a separate inbox portal or recipient. 27 targets seeded in advance. Some anonymous, some not, some waiting. Whistleblower groups, media desks, an old contact at the SEC, one copy to Ela Mearson, one routed through an archive interface tied to a burner Slack account named Curtis B. I thought about removing that last one. I didn't. At 7:42 p.m., Twitter lit up. First came the whispers, then a blurry screenshot of a vendor contract. Then someone linked the shell companies to a private consultancy run by Blair's sister-in-law. Comments followed fast. Conflict of interest, vendor, fraud, check the timestamps. By 9:13 p.m., someone posted an excerpt from an internal audit labeled confidential. It bore my formatting. My initials had been cropped out. At 9:58 p.m., Blair's LinkedIn went dark. By 10:17, someone shared a PDF labeled Lexicon Breakdown, unredacted. I hadn't sent that one, but I'd left enough for others to find it. And still, the upload bar on my backup monitor glowed green. Insurance deployment 100% complete. By morning, the internet had given it a name. Halvex leak was trending by 6:40 a.m. I hadn't posted a word. I hadn't forwarded a thing since the drive fired. But Reddit was already 3 layers deep into Timeline's board affiliations and shell company breakdowns. One thread stuck out. Operation Fossil Fuel. How a legacy staffer dismantled a fraud machine using their own system against them. The comments were half wild guesses and half dead accurate. One user traced invoice padding back 5 quarters. Another posted screenshots of internal emails referencing a special HR tag for employees over 50 unscalable I made tea and didn't check my work email. Ela, my attorney, texted twice. The dump had reached her clean. Her paralegal confirmed hash signatures and timestamp integrity. Everything had arrived exactly as scripted. The USB still in the drawer, still untouched, still labeled in black marker like a warning label no one wanted to peel. By noon, whistleblower inboxes across the tech world lit up. My breadcrumbs were being picked up by people who didn't need my name to understand the pattern. I didn't need to shout. I'd already made myself heard. At 1:17 p.m., a former teammate I hadn't spoken to since 2016 messaged from a burner email. We knew something was wrong. They called you paranoid, but you gave us air. Thank you. I didn't reply. It wasn't for gratitude. It wasn't for revenge. It was because they wrote me out of the script while I was still typing. By 4 p.m., one of the Lexicon contractors listed in my logs deactivated their website. Another posted a cryptic goodbye on LinkedIn. Sometimes the wrong people pay attention at the right time. I shut the laptop, slid the drive back into its hiding place, and leaned into the silence. Not triumph, not relief, just a stillness that felt earned. By 5:10, my landline rang for the first time in years. No caller ID. I didn't answer. But I recognized the hesitation in the voicemail. They were trying to contain the fire, but the fuse was already deep inside the walls. The first headline landed just after sunrise. Halvex CTO Blair Ridley subpoenaed in federal vendor probe. There was no quote from her, no statement from the company, just a blurry photo of her leaving a courthouse side entrance, hair pulled back, tight jaw set like a cracked hinge. The same photo appeared on 5 different outlets by noon. Then came the resignations. 3 C-suite names vanished from the executive page by mid-morning. No press releases, no farewell notes, just white space where titles used to be. Pursuing other opportunities, someone wrote in a company Slack before it was scrubbed 10 minutes later. The IPO was officially postponed by market close. Stock dropped 22%. But what made me pause? What made me smile into my second cup of tea was a leaked internal email chain from legal. Do not put anything else in writing. Assume legacy staff may have retained access to root-level archives before migration. They didn't name me, but they didn't have to. I put on my shoes and walked to the store around the corner. The sky was the color of unspoken things. I passed a young woman at the bus stop scrolling her phone, and for a second, she looked up like she almost recognized me. But then she looked away. At the frozen food aisle, I grabbed a box of pierogies and stood behind a man who muttered something under his breath while looking at a news alert on his screen. I caught 2 words, that woman. He didn't see me. Most people wouldn't. That's the trick, isn't it? They erase you until the gap you leave swallows them whole. I paid in cash. The receipt was warm from the machine. Somewhere in glass towers and boardrooms they were whispering now, not about how to restructure or pivot or innovate, but about her, the one they tried to quiet fire. And now, with no warning and no trace, the system had answered. By the time I stepped back inside, the sun was just beginning to dip behind the roofline, and my inbox was already filling with things they never meant for me to see. Friday morning arrived quietly. No more alerts, no headlines, just the steady hum of a world still pretending nothing had changed. My phone vibrated once at 6:42 a.m. It was an internal email, no greeting, no signature block, just a subject line. Final sweep. Did you leave behind any personal items or hardware? I stared at it for a moment, then tapped reply. 1 emoji. I hit send. Then I deleted the thread. I shut down the home server, wrapped the external drive in aluminum foil, and slid it into a drawer that hadn't been opened in years. There was no need for backups anymore. By 9:00 a.m., I was on the road. The cabin was just as I remembered, still crouched near the edge of the lake, still smelling faintly of cedar and old winters. My father had built it in the 70s when plywood was cheaper and pride came in bolts and screws. I hadn't been back in a decade. Now it felt like exactly the place to disappear without vanishing. I set the lunchbox on the table and opened it slowly. Inside, no USB, no paperwork, no triggers. Just a plain paper envelope filled with wildflower seeds I'd picked up at a co-op on the way. I ran my fingers through them, dusty ordinary, full of unknown colors. Quiet things that took root when no one was looking. Outside, the wind shifted. It smelled like new rain and the end of something unnamed. My name hadn't trended. There were no hashtags, no interviews, no tell-all posts. Just stories, just files, just enough to make them stutter when they opened their systems and realize someone had been watching from inside the walls the whole time. They cracked open a folder called Vacation Photos thinking it would be empty. Now they're the ones disappearing. And I'm exactly where I planned to be, untouched, unseen, and finally, after 22 years of protocol and permission, completely free.